on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here to talk to you about a novel that I finished reading yesterday. Last Son of Krypton by Elliot S. I don't know if it's Magin or Magin. I'm going to say Magin. This was a tie-in to the first Superman movie. I recently reread the book Superman vs. Hollywood. I talked about that a few years ago. It's basically about every not comic book Superman thing over the last century. Cartoons, radio stuff, movies, the serials, all of that stuff, live action TV shows. And in that, it talks about in the making of the first Superman movie, there was like 2 or 3 lawsuits leveled against I can't remember if it was Warner Brothers as a whole or if it was Alexander and Ilya Salkind who were producing the first Superman movie. I think it was the Salkinds. Based on what we know about the Salkinds and some of their seemingly very questionable business tactics, it would not surprise me in the least if some of these lawsuits were leveled directly at them. But Mario, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Puzo, who wrote the Godfather novel, he wrote the first script for the Superman movie. And I think by the time they got Richard Donner in, he said, this is unfilmable, we are not going to be able to do this. And so there was a few different passes at the script before it started to resemble the Superman movie that we got. There was a couple of other people who they came in, and I think they kind of trimmed down the Puzo script and added a little bit of their own flair to it, and then finally Richard Donner brought in Tom Mankiewicz, who worked on some of the James Bond movies of the 60s, and then finally it started to really look like the movie that we got. And so you could say there was really, because I think it was Puzo and then 2 other writers who had worked on the Superman musical from the 60s. I know I haven't talked about Last Son of Krypton yet, I'm getting there. And then Tom Mankiewicz. So 4 writers who worked on the first movie, and then the movie did very well. And Puzo sued, I think, the Salkinds, saying that he felt like they had misrepresented the movie's earnings so that they would not have to pay him as much. And following that, Marlon Brando also did a similar thing, feeling like he was lied to, basically. And I am not going to say whether that actually happened or not. All I will say is the Salkinds, like I said, they did some very questionable stuff. Before the Superman movie, they made a Three Musketeers movie, but they actually filmed 2 scripts at the same time and only paid their actors for 1 movie. And then they put out a second movie and didn't pay them 1 dime for that movie. And now in Hollywood, there is a thing called the Salkind Clause where you legally cannot do that. So I'm not going to say that the Salkinds actually misrepresented the movie's earnings, but if someone told me unequivocally that that did happen, it would not surprise me. I don't know why I'm talking legalese. Ilya Salkind's like in his 70s. He's not going to come after me now, and I could take him, let's be honest. So anyway, they wanted to do a tie-in novel to the movie. They wanted to do lots of tie-in stuff to this movie, especially when they found out how successful it was. Unfortunately, they could not do a tie-in novel that in any way resembled any of the base elements from the Puzo script. And all of that I found out from recently rereading Superman vs. Hollywood. And then I read The Last Son of Krypton, which is very clearly billing itself as a tie-in to the movie. You've got these little photos from the making of the movie, and then that's obviously Christopher Reeve. Now, they kind of put his face in shadow so they can be like, yeah, maybe, it's Superman. But we all can see, we have eyeballs, that's Chris Reeve right there. And so this is not in any way a tie-in to the movie. It's not even, because I don't know what the Puzo script looked like versus the final movie, but this is not even, okay, ignore what Puzo wrote, let's use what Tom Mankiewicz wrote. It's not even that. This is just a Superman story that very easily, see, I don't want to say that it could have come out in the comics in the mid-70s, because this feels a lot more grand and epic than anything that you might have read concerning Superman in the mid to late 70s. And I guess this is where I should probably talk about my Superman. Most of what I have read with Superman comes from post-Crisis on Infinite Earths, 85 to 86, post-Crisis to right when the New 52 started. I dabbled in Superman when the New 52 started. That was 2011, and I didn't really care for either of the Superman books, and so I've only read like 4 or 5 Superman books since the New 52. But most of what I come to think of when I think of comic book Superman is that time period right there. And very little of what I've read comes before Crisis on Infinite Earths. And I have read some Silver Age stuff. I have the Showcase Presents Supergirl. Most of that is in the mid-50s to very early 60s. And then I have a few books that have scattered Superman stories. One of them is about various General Zod stories. One of them is various time travel stories. One of them is the Kryptonite Nevermore storyline from the 70s, probably a few years before the movie came out. And then I think one of them is about various Nightwing and Flamebird stories. And most of that, I think that's all of my pre-Crisis Superman exposure. And I had always had this idea in my mind that pre-Crisis Superman is kind of silly, and I really don't enjoy it. You'll have an average story. For example, I recently read one that was a collection of stories about the Daily Planet, or stories that more heavily focused on the Daily Planet. And there was one story in particular. Supergirl had gone to the future, accidentally got exposed to red kryptonite, which you never know what's going to happen with red kryptonite. She comes back to the past, and as she's coming to the past, she sees 48 hours in her future, the future of her present time, Jimmy Olsen is going to die in a helicopter crash, a Daily Planet helicopter crash. And so she then goes to Jimmy Olsen and says, hey, you're going to die, but she's in her Supergirl costume, and the effects of the red kryptonite is she does not have powers only while she is in costume. When she changes back into her Linda Lee identity, she has powers. I have no idea how a non-sentient rock would know when she's wearing her Supergirl costume and when she's not, but whatever. So she then has to spend the rest of the issue trying to get Jimmy Olsen fired, because when she was in her Supergirl costume, he didn't believe that she was really Supergirl, and he thought she was just someone pranking him. So she's trying to get him fired, thinking if he's fired, he won't be able to die in a Daily Planet crash. And the issue is just kind of goofy. Just feels really silly. But I feel like I should put an addendum on that. I feel like silly, goofy, very overpowered Superman, that did exist for a time, but mostly in the 50s and 60s. I would say by the time you got to the late 60s, I would say that is when it felt to me like the creators were trying a little harder. We're not going to do some story where Lois Lane is once again, for the 1000th time, trying to prove that Superman is Clark. You're going to get some stories that feel like they have a little bit of gravitas to them. And I really want to check out some more, I'm going to talk eras for a minute. The Golden Age, for the purposes of this conversation, that would be 1938 to, let's say, 1950, for the purposes of this conversation. A lot of people will say the Silver Age actually started in 1956, which is when Barry Allen first appeared. Sure, you can even go that far. So then the Silver Age, 56 to, let's say, 1979. You could even, I would say the Silver Age, you could even say it started a little earlier, but so the Silver Age, I feel like that is the really goofy era of Superman, the stuff that I just don't really enjoy that much. The Bronze Age, you don't hear people talk about Bronze Age stuff a lot. That would be the 1970s and early 80s. But I feel like Bronze Age Superman is very interesting. You don't hear a lot of people really talk about Bronze Age Superman. But this is taking the Superman here is very, very powerful, incredibly powerful, but this feels like a really heavy, interesting story. This is not a goofy story where Superman, I'm going to trick Lois Lane. She thinks that she's figured out that I'm Clark Kent, but I've got this robot over here that looks like me, and it's going to trick her. Oh boy, what a prank. This is not that. This, like I said, it has a certain grandiose scale to it that I very rarely see in Superman stories in general, but especially not pre-Crisis stories. But I am starting to wonder, because Elliot S. Magin, he wrote Superman comics for a little while. There's at least one story I am aware of that it has Brainiac and Luthor on the cover, and they are, I think they have Superman shrunk down, maybe. I'm 99% sure that that was written by Elliot S. Magin. There is also one, I think it's something to the effect of, does the world need a Superman? It's something, it's not that exactly, but it's something like that. And if I am not mistaken, I believe Elliot S. Magin, he knew a young Jeff Loeb, and I think I read somewhere that Jeff Loeb actually gave Magin that idea for that comic. But Elliot S. Maggin wrote a lot of Superman stuff around this time period, and I recently, in that Daily Planet book that I have, I read one of the Maggin issues. It was okay. It wasn't as good as this. This is, I'm taking however long to actually get to the book, but this is one of my favorite Superman stories. It's really good, and it made me pause and reconsider, do I actually not like pre-Crisis Superman as much as I always thought? And I think I'm coming down on, if there was more books that collected Bronze Age Superman, like late 70s stuff, I would be interested in reading some of that. I'd really, if I never read another issue where Superman is playing a prank on Lois Lane or Jimmy Olsen, like, you know, he's burning the bathrobe that Jimmy gave him, if I never read another issue like that, it would not be soon enough. But something that's kind of like this, I would be very interested in checking that out. So, let me get to the actual story here. I'm not going to go into heavy spoilers here. I do want you to read this book. If you find it somewhere, buy it and read it. This is, like I said, one of my favorite Superman stories, and I was surprised as I got into it how much I liked it. But this story is able to take, if I had my way, if I was given the keys to the kingdom of DC Comics and they said, what are you going to do? Let's say they said, we have to do another reboot. Comics Kid, what are you going to do? I would make Superman much less powerful, even less powerful than he is right now. And he's been depowered significantly since this book came out. John Byrne depowered him quite a bit. I would even go further. I would have him be like Golden Age powerful, and then you can build up to him being more powerful later. But this book has him, he's able to travel to the future under his own power. He's able to fly through space without needing to breathe. He has been to other alien star systems many times before the events of this story. At one point, it talks about how he is studying some alien virus in his spare time, trying to find a cure for it. And I've never really been a big fan of Superman being super smart, where he has total recall of everything that he's ever seen or heard, and he can rattle off really complex math equations very quickly, right off the top of his head. I don't like that idea, but this book, it's still interesting that even when he's not being Clark Kent, and when he's not saving cats from trees or runaway trains, he is still trying to help people, and not just people of Earth. And I find that really interesting. And this book, basically, like I said, I don't want to get too much into spoilers because I don't want to spoil anything if you do think you might want to read it, but it involves an alien who steals a document on Earth, and then Superman has to team up. I'll go ahead and spoil this part. Superman has to team up with Lex Luthor to try to get the document back. And so about half the book takes place on Earth, and about maybe a little less than half of it takes place on this alien world. And I really liked seeing Lex and Superman both having common ground and needing to team up. You see that every now and then, not often. Like I said, most of what I know of Superman is from 85 to 2011, and I can't think of any time in that time period where they teamed up. You see it like in the DC animated universe, and I think they were a little bit less adversarial post New 52, but in the stuff that I'm familiar with, I cannot think of any written stories where they team up, but this makes me buy it. I really like the way that they make that work, and I love the bad guy. I'm not going to get into any spoilers here, but there is a really interesting parallel between the bad guy and between Superman. And there's also some interesting parallels between Lex Luthor and Superman. Superman obviously has the dual identity of Clark Kent and Superman. But this story suggests that Lex Luthor, he is not just Lex Luthor, criminal mastermind, but he also has multiple identities to help him in whatever he's doing for any given situation. He might create Joe Schmo, who is a really weird, eclectic artist who is a hermit. And so Joe Schmo creates this weird-looking abstract art that's in an art museum, and when Lex and Superman are getting ready to go to this alien world to try and get back this document, Lex says, I invented this. This is a spaceship. It's not a weird piece of modern art. It's a spaceship, and I'm just hiding it here for whenever I need to use it. And he has several different identities that he keeps in his pocket for whenever he needs to do something, and he can't do it as Lex Luthor. This also it doesn't go full on businessman Luthor, but this does kind of feel like a predecessor to in the Superman 2000 pitch from the late 90s. That was by Mark Millar, Grant Morrison, Tom Peyer, and Mark Waid. They all got together and they were given the go-ahead to pitch us what you guys would do with Superman. And then they wrote this little document talking about what all they would do, some of the stories they would do, and how they handle some of the characters. And then when they brought it to editorial, an editor who didn't know that they were told to do it said, "You guys will never work on Superman." The hubris of you guys. And then most, if not all of them, ended up working on Superman at one point later on. But in the Superman 2000 pitch, it presented Luthor as he is a businessman. He has LexCorp, but he spends like 5 minutes a day working on LexCorp stuff, and the rest of his day he's using his super brain to do different stuff. And this kind of feels like that. It's not LexCorp, it's his criminal underworld that he's running, but it feels like this Luthor feels a lot smarter than what later versions of Lex would play him. And I really like that. I like seeing a Lex who is smart, but also at the same time, he isn't quite smart enough to figure out what a lot of people say would be obvious. Like at one point, Superman is detained by some aliens, and Lex is going through, Superman has like a pocket on the inside of his cape, and he is going through the pocket, and he finds Superman has somehow like compressed his Clark Kent clothes into these small little wafers, and Lex is like, I don't know what these are, and I have no idea why Superman has this pair of glasses in his cape, but I'll just throw this over here. And so Lex is smart. At no point do I feel like he is stupid, but sometimes something happens, and because he sees the world in a certain way, he refuses to see the possibility that Superman might be Clark Kent. And that's really interesting, and that's something that's kind of been played with a little bit too in later stories. I don't know if I have a whole lot more to say. This is a Clark Kent who works at Galaxy Broadcasting instead of the Daily Planet, and that is something from the 70s that it's always weird when I go back and read something from that, like in the Kryptonite Nevermore storyline. I think that's when that got started, but it's always weird, like if I just read a novel and then it's like, oh, he's a TV reporter, he's not a newspaper reporter. And so Lois is in the book, but she's not working with Clark. And Steve Lombard is in the book, and he has a TV interview with Pele, the soccer player, and he is, I guess, working at Galaxy Broadcasting also, although I was always thinking that Lombard worked for the Daily Planet specifically. But Jimmy Olsen shows up briefly. Perry White does not show up, I don't think. And Martha and Jonathan, they do show up in flashback. This might be using the status quo that they are dead by the time this story takes place. I don't know. But yeah, I don't have a whole lot more to say. Find this book if you can and read it. I found it to be very interesting. Imagine also wrote another book that came out a couple years later, Miracle Monday. I have not read Miracle Monday. I did start it, though. And so you might see me do a video about Miracle Monday. But I had heard lots of people growing up when I first started getting into superheroes, lots of people will say that Miracle Monday is one of the best Superman stories. I never hear anyone talk about Last Son of Krypton. Never did. Whenever I would hear about Miracle Monday, never heard people talk about this one. And I feel like that's not fair. I think this book is amazing. So yeah, that's all. Hope you guys like this video, and I will see you in the future. Bye.